Hi, folks. My name is Umang. I run marketing at Balbix. Super excited to welcome you to this product update webinar. I'm super excited to share, and Vinay, obviously, who is CTO, head of engineering at Balbix, is excited to show you what we have been brewing for the last few weeks, last few months. So hang tight. We'll just give it a couple of minutes for folks to roll in, and then we'll get started. Thanks again for everyone joining in. I shouldn't say days, Vinay. I should say months and months, but it just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it's a continuous process.
Yeah. And for folks joining in, just know that this is going to be uh, one of the many product updates that we have planned. We won't be able to get to everything that we have shared and developed recently. So we're showing you today the top 3 things that every customer has asked us for, and that aligns with the vision of the future. And we have brought in a lot of the AI to the forefront. Um, and then right after that, we will do the next one. So we're at 9:04, Vinay. We're ready to get started. So welcome, folks. This is one of the first in the series of our product updates webinar. We've launched just this new product just a few weeks back, and our objective is to deliver a continuous update of these new features to you. So Vinay, the first question that every customer that I've heard asked us, we have too many vulnerabilities, too many exposure. How do we get our arms around them? So tell us a little bit about how we're solving that for the smallest and the largest of customers.
Yeah. So when it comes to cybersecurity, in general, solving any problem, right? Like the first thing is, what do we need to resolve, right? Like what gives us the maximum ROI? And that question in particular in cybersecurity today is really hard with the number of vulnerabilities that are actually coming in and the tens of thousands of assets, millions of assets sometimes, right, that are present, tens of millions of like software instances that are present, the controls. The key thing is like, how do you actually put all of these things together? And what prevents us from doing this today is lack of visibility, right? Lack of prioritization, redundant work because of these two things that is actually being done in silos by like many different teams. And that this ultimately results in not knowing what we have achieved in a period of time with tens of thousands of person hours that we have spent and millions of dollars that we have spent. Have we reduced the cyber risk at all? Have we not? Because ultimately, that's the holy grail. That's what really matters. And if you think about it, there are vuln scanners, there are endpoint tools, there are like patch management tools, network scanners, EDR, SaaS, DAST, SCA, red teaming, pen test. Each one of them is done in an operational manner by like different teams. But what do we need to focus on? How do we bring it all together? And how do we put them together to say that this is the priority order in which we need to go? That's the key question. And if we have achieved that, Umang, then we know that we are doing the right things, or we can adjust. That's basically what it is. And I will actually talk more about this. We'll jump into the product at this point in time, right? So the first question to answer is, what are my data sources? Where is the data coming from, right? You have like EDR tools, you have like Qualys scanner, you have like Rapid7 scanner, you have Tenable scanner, you have external scanners, you have endpoint tools such as like Tanium, you have ServiceNow CNDB. Let's not forget that. Is it good? Is it bad? That's the key question that actually keeps coming up. Will it actually help me with the business contextualization? In here, to simply take a look at this is what we call as the bird's eye view. This, in my opinion, is the most important thing or the most important high-level visualization that any executive, any operational director should actually have access to, right? I am getting 27,000 assets in a deduplicated manner from like tens of different data sources. When I deduplicate all of them, when I correlate and when I aggregate all of these things, I get 9,000-ish assets in here, right? And several of our customers, we are really talking about like millions of assets that are actually coming in that get deduplicated into like hundreds of thousands to less than a million assets. And when I say assets, this includes infrastructure assets, this includes applications, this includes software instances, this includes control instances, users, all of these things, right? Because that is the attack surface area that we need to measure and understand, deduplicate, aggregate, correlate. And then transform that, convert that, infer from that as to like what are the key vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are essentially like weaknesses that an adversary will go after to cause a material damage to the enterprise, right? Now, again, when I take a look at the vulnerability instances that are actually coming, I mean, it's insane, right? Like every Patch Tuesday, Microsoft actually gives us the gift of like, here are like few hundred vulnerability instances on every single asset in your enterprise, right? What matters, what doesn't matter. Then there is an Apache Log4j that actually comes out. Then there is a Spring4 shell that comes out. Then HTTP2. There are so many vulnerabilities. Now, when we deduplicate aggregate, I have like a close to like a 4 million exposures, right? Like these are 4 million data points that the adversaries can actually go after. But I have controls in place. Some of them are more important assets. Some of them are less important assets. When I prioritize all of these things, ultimately for every single organization from what we have actually seen, it's less than 2%, less than 3% of the vulnerabilities that really matter in the overall risk reduction, right? Now, imagine if you had to do 3 things instead of 100 things in order to reduce your risk by like 80%, 90%. Why would we not do that? The problem here is that it is hard to do it. It's not a human scale problem. I don't even know if I can actually load all of these things on my Excel. It's not possible, right? And if I can't even load it on my Excel, how am I going to do any sort of prioritization? This is where AI comes into play. And there is a purpose-built AI model that needs to be present in order to resolve every one of these things. There is no silver bullet for like all of these things. I am going to bring in like one single model for AI and I'm going to solve all the problems. That's not how it works. It has to be purpose-built for categorization. It has to be purpose-built for deduplication, for inferring the vulnerabilities, for prioritizing the vulnerabilities, understanding the controls, understanding the business context, and putting it all together to say like, here are the 5,000 vulnerabilities that I need to actually resolve, right? And now we have actually talked about visibility. We have talked about deduplication of all of the, the assets, the applications, the users, the controls, prioritizing these vulnerabilities. But visibility is as good as what you can actually do after you have gotten this visibility, right? It's in fact, one of the customers that I was actually talking to, he said like, the more visibility that I have, the more heartburn because I don't know what to do with it. So mobilization actually becomes an important thing. Automation is the key, right? Imagine that you would be able to send out, hey, here are the set of external facing CISA vulnerabilities that I need to resolve on a daily basis. Here are the CISA vulnerabilities on our critical systems that I need to resolve on a weekly basis. You're doing it by hand. Imagine the system actually does this all by itself. It's a closed loop system, right? So which ones do you want to actually automatically send for remediation? Which ones do you want to triage? Ultimately is what is going to result in the overall risk reduction, right?
Yep. Fantastic. So that's a great starting point. There are all these assets that are now deduplicated. There are exposures that are now sent for dispatch versus that are deprioritized. Can you unpack what the prioritization of exposure really means and how it works?
Yeah. So a lot of people who have been using Balbix are extremely familiar with this concept, but let me actually take 10 seconds to talk about like what are the key building blocks in order to actually do this. Visibility, prioritization, quantification, They all need to come together. These are the three most important pillars from any cyber risk IT standpoint, right? And they all have to interact with each other. It is essentially to say that you can't change what you can't measure, and you can't measure what you can't observe. So let me dive a little bit into the overall inventory side of things, right? Like the visibility side of things, and then we can get into the prioritization, and then we can talk a little bit about like quantification as to like how it all works. So as soon as I get in, I need to have a good understanding of my assets, my applications, my users, my controls, right? And how are these all grouped together? But let me dive into the assets first. When I go here, it actually gives me a sense for what is the total number of assets? Where are these assets actually coming from? This is the super important thing, right? What are my data sources? And people often overlook this, which is which ones of them have like good visibility in terms of like telemetry. Yes, I have an IP address. What does that IP address really mean? I need to have an understanding of like, what is the operating system on that? What are the various pieces of software? Is it sitting outside? Is it sitting inside? Is it a customer facing thing? Do I have the right kind of controls in place? This is essentially the telemetry, right? This is key for resolving, understanding and resolving issues. You need to know, like, okay, here are the set of assets that have good telemetry or good visibility, high fidelity, whatever adjective you want to put there, right? And then here are the ones that do not have, and I need to do something about this. The risk reduction, most people actually think that it's all about like, okay, going and resolving vulnerabilities. No, not really. Sometimes it is about like bringing in the right kind of information too. If I don't have an EDR on a system, I need to go fix it, because that is the investment that I have made, and I am not really taking advantage of that investment, right? And after that, it is about like, how many assets do I have with critical exposures, high exposures, medium exposures, because these are the ones that matter. And you see, the beautiful thing about this is that of all of the 8,500 assets, 9,000 assets that I have, a few tens of them are the ones that have like critical exposures and high exposures. And this is what really matters to me from like going ahead and resolving these vulnerabilities, right? And then ultimately diving deeper into like, okay, what are the various asset types? How many workstations do I have? How many servers do I have? How many container workloads do I have? How many S3 buckets do I have? Cloud assets, on-prem assets, data center assets, all of these things. And last but not the least is the operating platform. I mean, how many of them, like, the Palo Alto, the vulnerability came out. You can't really be doing a scan and trying to understand like, okay, how many Palo Alto firewalls do I have? It should be like, you should have this information right there, right? Apache Log4j came out, right? I need to know like, what are my external facing assets and which ones are the ones that have like Log4j. So here is a view that actually provides you with, all my assets, various attributes. And if you take a look at it, I have 101, 110, 105, depends on the enterprise, the number of attributes that you can actually associate with any given asset. And again, I will actually say this. The key question that we need to ask is, how wide is your data model, right? And the second question that we need to ask is, every one of these attributes in your data model, how does it actually help me with visibility? How does it actually help me with like slicing and dicing my network? How does it actually help me with like overall risk reduction? How does it actually help me with like control understanding, right? Ultimately, how does this all help me with my risk reduction, right? And this is one of the key things that our customers have been asking, depending on the role and the job that they're doing on a daily basis. I have to specifically, customize this view for my needs. Somebody says that for me, the most important thing is like what site this is present on, what is the IP address range. Some people say that, okay, I want to understand what is the total number of vulnerabilities. I need to sort it by that. Some people say that, give me all the assets that have critical vulnerabilities that are open, right? This is the view that can be customized per individual's needs. And I will talk a lot more about this. This is a workbench that you can actually use to export, to connect to your outside world, or your SOC, and all of these things. create automations to actually make sure that these are, the system is actually doing the work for you, right? And then prioritize, right? All of these things should actually happen from one single workbench. And this is one of the reasons why we have also built a very powerful advanced filters, a search mechanism that we actually say, where you can, which will help you with slicing and dicing your network into like exactly what you need to see, right? Like, for example, I have actually said that I need to understand what my domain controllers are. When I click on that, these are my 71 domain controllers, right? Or I need to say, right, what are my various unpatched desktop laptops? Here are my unpatched desktop laptops. Right? So similarly, from an application standpoint, I should be able to do the same thing. And here, the attributes are a little bit different. Who is my app owner? Who is my business owner? Who is my IT owner, right? Like, what is the specific application? What are the various data sources that this is actually coming in from? And I'll be able to click into this and then get a bird's eye view very, very quickly on like, what is the total number of findings that I have, which ones of them are CVE, which ones of them not non-CVE, inventory details, the findings. And very, very, very important thing is from an application perspective, people understand this from like, okay, here are my SaaS vulnerabilities, here are my SCA vulnerabilities, DAST vulnerabilities, but what are the various infrastructure elements that are associated with this, right? That is typically stale or not even present. I should be able to get into this and understand like what are the various assets that are associated or supporting this particular application, what are the various roles, which one of them are external facing, and all of those good stuff, right? Again, there's a lot to talk about here. In the interest of time, let me actually move into what do you do with this information, right? I go into the asset vulnerabilities, and as I said, here are the set of instances that I have in my environment. Right. Well, it is actually fairly well prioritized at this point in time. It says like I have like 10 critical and 79 high that I need to take care of right now. A total of like 4 million vulnerability instances telling me like where this data is actually coming from, how many of them are CVs, how many of them are non-CVs. Because see, the important thing here is this, right? When it comes to risk-based vulnerability management, as we used to call it, or still we call it, or exposure management as the new term, what we are all trying to adapt to is typically this term RBVM refers to CVEs only, right? Because in general, RBVM has actually been used from, I have threat associated with this. I have some EPS score associated with this. And that's about it, right? But if you think about like a true risk-based vulnerability management program, it should be about what is the asset, what is the exposure of the asset or accessibility of the asset, what controls do I have in place, what is the business impact associated with this, and then the severity and the threat associated with the vulnerability. They all have to actually come together, right? And if I take a look at this, hey, why is this particular thing prioritized for me all the way at the top? If I go, the first thing that happens is it gives you the information which is present. A part of it is actually present in the outside world, but a lot of it will have to actually be inferred appropriately, specific to your environment, also specific to the vulnerability. The presence of TTPs and CWEs is less than 5% of the vulnerabilities, at the most 10%, right? But this is the key for understanding, okay, what is the adversary really going to go after? And bringing in the threat information. Is this linked to my ransomware? Or is this linked to a ransomware? Is this linked to a CISA, right? Has it been mentioned in social posts? Has this been talked about in the dark web? What is the overall adversary activity that we have been observing over a period of time? Then bring it all together. You need to think about like the asset attributes. You need to think about like what are the vulnerability attributes, the age, the severity, the impact on that particular asset, the threats associated with that, the controls associated with this. And then ultimately what it is actually saying is there are no mitigations available for this. The impact of the asset is actually fairly high. This is an external facing asset, right? The accessibility is of course very high because it's an external facing asset. The impact, confidentiality, availability, these are all important things. When I actually put all of these things together, it gives me an exposure score of 81, which means that this is one of the top vulnerabilities that need to be prioritized for this particular firewall?
This is fantastic. In fact, that's one of the questions that we already got, which you answered, which is how do we determine an exposure score as high versus low? And so for folks, as we're about to come to the last 10 minutes of this webinar, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A. I'm going to answer it on the side. So that answers a sort of a major question that we had opened it up with, which is there are too many vulnerabilities, the exposure is too high. What do we do? So this is great, and it's so transparent because people can now understand and see what's causing and what's the impact of a particular exposure and why is it that in their environment in combination of an internal and external factors. But Vinay, what's the main question still remains that we still haven't solved the problem of fixing them. There are still 89, 90 criticals and high in your environment. And if you're a large customer, you likely have this in triple digits, in 4 digits, sometimes in 5 digits.
Yep.
Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So again, Umang, again, it actually comes down to like slicing and dicing the network and routing the information appropriately for the people who actually need to fix it, right? And again, I'm going to go back to this. This one actually gives you the ability to slice and dice your vulnerability information, AppSec information, all of those good stuff or bad stuff, right? And then create appropriate filters. Like, for example, I need to come here and take a look at, okay, what are my CISA kevs on external facing assets? These are the ones that matter to me. Or I will actually go ahead and say, what are the vulnerabilities that have been recent severity vulnerabilities, right? This is a set of things that matter to me. So things like this, right? And then now we are ready to hit the automation because now we have created the filters. Now we have an understanding of like what matters the most to us. The most important thing is that the automation creation or like, the remediation workflows have to be like not more than like a few clicks because people are busy and it has to be very, very focused. Let me walk you through this something very quickly. There is exports, there is notifications, there is like a whole bunch of things that we do, but the most used is either send it to patch or send it as a ticket, right? I'm going to create a CISA ticket, right? And I'm going to do it on asset vulnerabilities. And I'm going to say the scope of automation is asset vulnerabilities using a matched saving filter, right? And this is mine. Hit next. I am going to do this on a schedule, which I'm going to do daily at 12 a.m. and say, create a ticket. This is going to just pick this for now. This is all defined through ticketing templates, which we can actually talk about specifically from a mobilization standpoint in one of our other upcoming webinars, right? Hit next, make this rule active and create automation. You're done. So what this is going to do is it is going to create or it's going to update a specific ticket for the external facing CISA vulnerabilities or the whatever we did continuously. That ticket is going to be updated. That patch management system is actually going to be updated, or that notification is actually going to be sent to a specific set of people. It should be that simple.
This is awesome. And so going back to the first bird's eye view, the concept of looking at all the data that's coming in, looking at the exposures that you need to fix and prioritize, now focusing on the ones that have low impact because of a control, because of low business impact, and then automating the workflow. Does that mean today, Vinay, we still have to create dashboards and charts and filters to interact with the system?
That's a great question. See, the one thing that I actually held back from the overall platform perspective in the very beginning, Umang, is that we talked about visibility, we talked about prioritization, we talked about quantification, right? But more often than not, you would expect or you would hope that there is an assistant that can actually help you with doing certain things, right? And this is where the Balbix, the AI, the the Gen AI model that specifically helps you answering a question, just like how a very smart executive assistant, an operational assistant would actually help you with, right? I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'm going to switch over to my mobile phone because more often than not, it is always the mobile experience for an assistant that matters the most. We have recently announced Balbix Intelligent Experience, which actually sits on top of all of this data, analyzes the information that is actually specific to an enterprise environment, brings in the information from the outside world, and then also has an intricate understanding of the cybersecurity terminology and the various processes, CIS, TTPs, CWEs, all of these things, and puts them all together to help you answer questions in a very succinct and an actionable manner.
Awesome. And looks like Bix has joined the chat and he looks just like you.
Let me,
Must be really smart.
well, let's see.
Let's find out.
Give me 5 seconds here. I thought that showing this on the phone is the
Best
this fix, right? So there are questions, right? I'm going to go with one of them that Bix is already suggesting for me based on my environment, right? What are my top unpatched vulnerabilities? I'm going to start with something operational in nature, and then we can actually get into like some of the very, very cool things that we can ask Bix to do. And it's telling you what it's actually doing, right? Like it's going ahead and fetching the top unpatched vulnerabilities. Then it's actually going to go ahead and correlate it with the external world as to like what is going on, correlate it with the cybersecurity terminology, and it's going to give you the information. If I had to worry about like top 5 vulnerabilities, it's actually telling me that these are the top 5 vulnerabilities that I need to worry about, right? I can say like, okay, what are my top
This is awesome.
ransomware vulnerabilities, right?
Oh, some typo there with the random reset. Let's see what your Bix is able to do now.
Yeah.
And I assume all of this data that we are collecting comes from the enterprise environment. So anybody who has access to, anybody who has Balbix in their environment is able to interact with Bix, correlate the data. They don't have to go to the dashboard. They don't have to wait for reports. They don't have to talk to someone, which
Absolutely.
the biggest time saver, because in a large matrix organization, you always have to wait for someone to give you the responses.
Yeah. Just like human beings, we actually do typos, mistakes, but this is so contextually aware that it actually picked
Yes.
up the random reset to and correlated it with the HTTP2 rapid reset. And it is actually telling you about like what are the vulnerabilities that matter the most from like a random, I mean, whatever, HTTP2 reset kind of like vulnerabilities. And it told you like, okay, here is what you need to do. Now I can actually say like top risk issues, right? And it should be able to tell you like what are the top risk issues in your environment. Again, Umang, I think this Bix in itself actually deserves a specific 15-30 minute webinar, and you and I can actually talk about this upcoming days and weeks.
That sounds great. We are just about at time. So to recap, to summarize, we talked about how the new Balbix platform helps consolidate infrastructure, vulnerabilities and exposure, application risk findings, cloud misconfigurations into a single platform. The data is normalized, deduplicated, so you have a clean view of your asset, your applications, your vulnerabilities, or exposure. We take a uniform CVE, non-CVE view to prioritize based on threat intel, control information, business impact, and exploitability, accessibility. So organizations are focused on the ones that truly matter in their environment. And then we automate the ability to fix those vulnerabilities and exposure with just a few steps, as you demonstrated. And then finally, cherry on top, there is Bix, the ability and assistant to help you get the insights, get the data from your environment, interact in a natural way without ever having to rely on someone else to give you short, quick answers to things. Um, this is great. I think this is a lot to digest in 30 minutes. Thanks for being here today, Vinay. Thanks for taking this time. We're definitely going to deep dive into some of these more later, but really appreciate your time. And then for the audience, I hope you got a sense for where we are. We appreciate you joining. A lot more information about Balbix D3, which is a new platform, and Bix is available on our website. If you want a deep dive demo, you can let us know over here, or you could go to our website and sign up for deep dive of the Balbix D3 platform, of the new capabilities of the Bix platform. We're happy to show you more. We're happy to get into the details, but really appreciate everyone joining. Thanks for taking the time. Vinay, thanks for your time again, and see you guys on another product webinar. Thanks, everyone.
I know.